This is the Fairy Realm Summit with Camilla Blossom. We're excited to be here together with everybody, sharing fairy magic and bringing in beautiful fairy energies, activations, awakenings for everybody, and to just awaken that fairy heart connection with all fellow fairy lovers, incarnated fairies, and everyone who just loves the fairy realm. Welcome, Camilla. Want to say hi
Thank
to
you,
everybody?
Andrea. I'm so excited to be here. I know we've done a lot of fairy things over many years. I think we both are fae, right? And elemental. So, yeah, I really identify as a fairy queen aspect. So I'm really excited to share more about my journey, our journeys, and what's kind of coming through from those realms at this time. It's such a massive change time for everyone. Like, why is it that we would want to connect with them, right?
Yeah, and I feel like it always goes back to ascension or the path of the human heart returning to nature, which the fairies come through loud and clear as we are ascension guides. Like part of human suffering is the falling asleep of the connection to the mystical nature realms, magic of nature, the mysteries. And the fairies really hold that connection for us and bring that magic for us. So I think that's why we want to connect
Yeah.
with them. That's why they're like such a breath of fresh air, especially for us.
Mm.
We're like, oh, I want to go spend time with the fairies. For me, it's, drawing the fairies, meditating with the fairies, channeling the fairies. Like it feels so invigorating. Even when we knew we were getting on today, it's not tiring at all. It's healing. And I'm excited to feel what they're going to bring in for evolution, but also for the holiday season, bringing in some of that magic in the holiday season, but even in our day-to-day rituals or weekly rituals, which I always try to do is spend time with the fairies. Like yesterday, going out and working with the blue spruce fairies and making little, fairy essences and things. It feels like such a good balance when I get caught up in the matrix or the muggle world and the stress and the politics and all that stuff versus this other connection, this subtle, sweet connection with nature and the nature that's right in front of me. The blue spruce is right up the street, offering its magic and healing.
I love that. That was so beautifully said. I felt like all these chills when you were saying that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's such a depth. I know we've talked about this quite a bit, and also with the work that we do as teachers and mentors for people. Like so many people, and myself included, have kind of been asleep to who we really are. And so this is such a way to come home, back to yourself, back to like that we are nature beings and that we need to be with nature and connected and co-creating. And it's not specifically that you need to talk to a fairy, it may just be the energy of the forest or loving to garden. But when you do open more to the gnomes and the fairies and the Davic realms and all the different spirits, I kind of call them sacred spirits of Gaia, then there's like this magic and this fulfillment, and you're like building, it's almost like renewing relationship again, right, with nature, instead of going along the way we've been, culture has taught us, or the programming. It's like breaking free and going back to our wildness, rewilding, people call it. And you can do that even when you're at your home, right? I mean, it's great to be out in nature, but I think a lot of work we do is you can tune into those realms and those beings all the time. They're always with us. They can help us heal. They can help us with our business. Andrea and I talk a lot about our businesses, and we have fairy teams and unicorns and gnomes and different beings that support us in all different ways. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and before we go further, let's just introduce everyone. I'm Andrea Dombecki from Angel Fairy Healing, and this is Camilla Blossom. And we wanted to start these series of summits. We already did the Dragon and Ascension Summit. That's just an hour-long talk where we do some dragon attunements and things. That's on both of our YouTubes, Camilla Blossom or Angel Fairy Healing. And then Camilla, do you want to just talk about how people can reach you and what you offer?
Sure. You can reach me through my website, camillablossom.com, or also on Patreon at Camilla Blossom. And I do the Patreon membership and also classes. And I do have a fairy class coming up because there was such a call for us to break out of kind of old restraints or restrictions about our connection and relationship to fairy, opening up if our like the new roles really want to be expressed. So this will be an event, a two-part event, December 7th and 14th online, to connect more with your fairy ancestors, your fairy guides, to journey with them, to have more communication and learn to co-create. So that's kind of what I have coming up.
That's
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah, I always love Camilla's classes, and I've been to them in person and online for years. And I'm gracious for that connection and the magic that she carries, which always kind of helps, reawaken it in me, because we get disconnected from that work. And then, we go to a healing class and we get connected. My cats come to bed. But yeah,
Just like the hang with us, your cat.
yeah, he gets excited in the beginning of classes, and then he'll like go to sleep and just kind of go into the other realms. But yeah, so before we go further into the topics today and see what comes through, let's set the space. And I really feel this like fairy heart symbol, like the fairies want to communicate with everyone's hearts, and they want to awaken the sleeping fairies, whether that's our own fairy self, fairy communication, like being open to whatever way they want to reach people. I feel like they're sending out this fairy transmitter. And it's funny because I just finished one of my fairy tales, The Enchanted Fairy Heart. And the premise is that there's an ancient fairy heart that was made by the ancient fairies, like in a cave, and it's like crystal magical acorn. And when they activate it in the future, it sends out this heart healing to unite humans, fairies, and nature. And it's funny because that's coming through right now,
Yeah.
like that book is alive. And I do believe a lot of fairy tale magic's hidden in movies and stories. There's a lot of wisdom in that. So I want to awaken that synchronicity for everybody, like awaken that paying attention to the synchronicities all around you in books, movies, art, everywhere that the fairies are connecting with you. So I'm just going to start by helping everyone open that heart, and then we're just going to open the veil to bring in a closer connection to our fairy guides. I do feel lots of different ones, different height fairies, gnomes, elves, trees, all of that kingdom of fairies and elementals, even dragons and unicorns, just really want to connect with everyone again. And they want us to sense them and feel them on the parallel dimension, and just feel their loving presence in our lives, because I think we naturally did as children. But then we kind of get it deprogrammed from us, because I think kids, like, they really sense the dragons, unicorns, fairies, like they get excited if you mention it. But then as we grow up, we get taught it's make believe, and we don't feel the magic as much. So I think that's something that we're working on today. It's like reawakening that childhood connection with the fairy realm. And yeah, please add whatever you'd like to add.
Yeah. Really attuning to your intuition and imagination, right? Through the heart. But also another thing to open to more, one of the messages of the fairies was that they're multidimensional, that they really live in all dimensions. And a lot of us are opening more to connection with like star fairies and higher elemental fairies. So I invite you to connect, make sure you're grounded, but connect with your soul star, which is right above your head. It's a chakra. It's like where your higher self is and your connection to your divinity. And also where you step out of duality or judgment. And so if you just want to take a moment, we can connect into that space. Just feel that, experience it, ask for healing or cleansing. And also a place to connect with your fairy higher self or your fairy ancestry. And then also ground that chakra through all of your chakras into your earth star, which is your ancestor chakra. and that's between your feet in the earth. So we're kind of opening up both the earth, strong earth spiritual chakra below in Gaia, and then also above in the divine connection. Beautiful. And that's a really simple, quick way to kind of open and shift and move into those realms. You know, that kind of desire, I think, from a lot of people to see a fairy, to be in the fairy realms, to journey there. And that is a way you can quickly kind of shift yourself into more multidimensional awareness and experience more of those fairy beings, nature spirits.
Yeah, that feels great. I did feel like they were making up their own names for things because they were like the fairy soul star and like
Yeah,
fairy earth chakra.
right.
What it and so it's like, oh, and moving that into the light body, those memories.
Yeah. And like star fairy, because there was this big message, I think, the beginning of this year of like, don't just focus on like the nature spirits in your garden or the Davik fairies that kind of oversee things in nature or the different ones I'd work with, but also really connect with our ancestral. Some people work with the She, which is a whole race of fairy beings. But this whole planet of Gaia was created by these creator spirits, in a sense, that were in charge of, they're the keepers and the architects and the creators of nature, right? And so I think when you really start looking at what is fairy, it's like, whoa, right? It's much more expansive.
It's like the more we know, the more we don't know. And it's like the great mystery of like, oh, how is like spirit into matter, and then the architects of nature and the multidimensionality of nature.
Yeah.
I also feel like it has to do with races of people because being of like Irish descent, I feel like when I look back in my ancestry, it was built into the culture. So like that's like something too that's programmed. Like I was talking about the fairy star chakra, it was probably programmed since day one. The fairy connection was online, right? So we're bringing the fairy connection back online, like an antenna in that chakra above the head, like our fairy antennas. And then the mystery of why, like it's a hidden connection. Because I know for me, it's like coming home. Like I always like, oh, I don't feel comfortable on earth or in a body. But when I work with the fairy energy, it feels like this bridge to like, oh, I can be physical, but be one with nature. And I don't have to feel that sense of heavy humanness that kind of like unites me, even with gravity. Like it's like when we're connected to the nature grid, we don't feel gravity as much because we're one with everything around us.
Yeah. And also, I know I mentioned non-duality, like in part of this transition we're going through is instead of looking at everything as like good or bad or right or wrong or, you know, black or white, or it's when you're in that state, which to me is the fairy realms, when I'm really connected with nature and one with all there is, and allowing myself to step out, you know, in that field, meeting in that field beyond right and wrong, right? The Rumi poet talks about that when we're in that non-dual state, that state of oneness, we are one with, there's no veils. We're one with the fairy realms. We're one with nature spirits. And it's such a powerful healing to be in that state because you're not needing to go, is this the right thing to do? Am I doing this right? Is this where I'm going? It's just very expansive. I even had that experience when you're at the fairy congress, where I just went into this transcendent state and was in that field of oneness very powerfully. And I think that's what we're going to right now, is recognize that we are part of that field of nature.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you were talking, I was feeling like a lot of the energy of healing through play and the sweet joy of the fairies, which is the state of childhood that we've lost. It's been coming up a lot. And I remember like every now and then if I get a new fairy book or something, it's like I could feel it so deeply. And it was such a level of joy that I was more connected to as a child. I knew how to play, I knew how to have fun. And I knew how to be connected to, like, the magical streams of life almost, like, intuitively, or you could feel things in a magical way, like the animals around you, the colors, and so it's, like, almost like fairy sight of the world, fairy view of the world, and then there's so many aspects of that. It's playful joy, it's unity, so it's like a new level of forgiveness where, like, you see everyone as part of you and you're kind and, compassionate, and that you're more here, you're here, you're in the physical in a happy way. And that's throughout the years how they've helped me, like even in practical things like entertaining people, get along with people, like intuitively knowing what people need or how to make a fun environment for people that are visiting or something. And so it's like looking at that. And then I know you have like the big plant spirit medicine, flower essence, gardening, permaculture level of that too. So it's like they have so many different aspects. And I always feel like when we work with fairy life purpose, we look at that. It's like, are you a fairy fashion designer? Or maybe you're a fairy sustainable gardener? Like there's this huge array of like creativity, nature, magic, and also they love to work with children and animals. So it's like there's this full array of ways that we work with the fairies with our life purpose, and that invigorates us. And that's also part of ascension or the 5D earth, is that we're having these creative and healing gifts that the fairies help us with sometimes that are coming through. So I think that's a real big thing they're coming through with people listening today, is like, how are the fairies working with you with your life purpose? And your life purpose is like the beauty of this future that you are creating, because you're the architect of like your place in the 5D world. And it is an inner child healing, because I think it's a better relationship with life, with environment, with people, with work, with our creativity. So it's like I feel some major like beautiful fairy evolutionary codes coming through with that.
Yeah, and I could feel like a little bit earlier in this call, and maybe we can do this for a moment. I feel I'm seeing like people's fairies coming to their hearts. And so just take a moment and invite your fairy guide, the one that wants to work with you right now, to come closer. You might even get a sense of feeling them, seeing them. There might be a troop of them. Um, just be open to whatever you feel and experience. And they might have a message. I feel like a lot of them kind of want to say things to us or say things to your heart to remember. A lot of this is like Andrea's talking about, that remembering from our lineage. And I'm also seeing them doing some fun. And this is where like the imagination and play and delight can come in, is they're aligning us, attuning, transmitting energy. And we're the space that we're in, Andrea and I both being, healers for this, like we're helping bring this energy through this call so you can receive this now and have access to them maybe more than usual. So allow yourself to receive that, and also that they can be healing you physically. That's been coming up a lot in my Patreon. A lot of the people in there are like, oh my God, I'm having this experience with this gnome and it did this whole healing thing on me. Or this fairy came in, and I'm kind of used to it because I've done that a long time, but they really can heal us. And so opening to those realms in that way of asking for this healing or help or guidance or business help or relationship help, whatever, asking for that support from those realms, and really listening to what they have to say, as well as allowing yourself to follow more impulses, more of your imagination, your intuition in your daily life. Because sometimes maybe Andrea can speak on this too. They don't always speak to us with words. Nature's language is actually feelings. And so sometimes when you ask to work with a team of fairies, or you start opening to your ancestors or your guides, or they're coming in, giving you guidance, it's not just about listening to, oh, they're telling you to do this certain thing, right? It may be that you feel different, or there's healing energy coming in, and just receive it and rest. Or it could be, I need to go outside and play, or give an offering to this body of water or something. So being open to all the different ways. It's very symbolic as well, how the fairy realms work.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
really feel like it would be fun to share like how you got into working with the fairies. I think people love to hear that. And I don't know if I've ever heard that story. Like, what age did it
Oh.
start? When did you start? And then like what stages did it come in? Like first you were having fairy visions, then you started teaching. Like, can you just talk a little bit about your process of almost like fairy awakening?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of what you were talking about earlier, being a child. I didn't I didn't know that I was like a fairy hybrid, elemental hybrid kind of person, human. But when you're a child, just naturally, I went to the forest, especially the Adirondacks in New York State, where there's lakes and forests and plants and flowers. And I always felt this beautiful presence, but I didn't really identify it as fairy, elemental, or the specific energies. I just felt nature more in that oneness and that sense of spirit. So for a long time, that was how I experienced it. And then it was more connecting with other people, like through the Fairy Congress, um, where I realized, oh, yeah, there's like a whole bunch of different beings, and started taking more time to recognize. And especially making flower essences, I think was a big push in that direction, pull in that direction, I should say, where there'd be different kinds of devas and fairies and spirits of these trees and plants and lands. And they would communicate about the healing qualities of the plants. And so I think a big piece of the opening to the fairy realm was working with the flower essences, making them, and meeting people that were doing that kind of work as well, so that you could learn, or even, I don't even know, it was learning from the people that go to the Fairy Congress, but it's almost confirmation for a lot of people that, oh, when I'm with this tree, I just feel this huge energy. What is this? Who is this? Is there an actual spirit here? So it's been a very gradual, and I always think of myself more of like an ancient tree that was kind of a slow evolution of my path to open more and more. And yeah, having experiences too of seeing them, journeying with them. I think just keeping with those practices opened me more and more to them. But yeah, I'd say the flower essences were a big key. And also just taking flower, well, I know you've gotten big into flower essences too. But even taking them is a way that the plant spirits can talk to you and awaken you and bring you back to oneness and connect you. So I'd say a lot of it was to do with plants. Like I'm definitely a plant person. And so that awakening, I think, came a lot through the plants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a life purpose passion for you, is to like
Yeah.
share journeys to the fairy realms with others and be a guide to the fairy realm, which I feel like many of us you take that role as an ambassador because we hold the fairy connection, and then we're like a guide
Mm-hmm.
to almost like a fairy shaman, where if somebody needs the medicines of the fae, um we can guide them, because I know as an intuitive healer, you kind of feel like, oh, that person really needs the fairies, they're coming in so strong. And I know my connection was through channeling,
Yeah.
because I was an angel channeler, and then I started to channel fairies, and then they were so loud and it was so fun, and then I realized it was kind of like my fate, because I was always drawing them before I was consciously connecting with them. And
Mhm.
then that's like a major way. It's like a fairy oracle artist, drawing the visions that I have. And so that's kind of unfolded for me throughout the years. And then back to my lineage of um from Ireland, and the way my mom would like hear animals, and like she would give the animals flower essences, and she was always like very connected naturally to nature and the animals, and like sustainability, and she taught us that, like, we were always outside playing in nature, and we were like knew certain herbs and plants and like
Mhm.
healing things. Like she carried those things, and I feel like in my lineage it was like reawakening it, but then seeing it was always there, but it's like fallen
Yeah.
asleep. Like it's our fairy medicine women lineage almost.
Right.
And it's really fun to unlock that. And I think it's multidimensional. It's like herbs, flowers, but also a lot of energy healing and a lot of
Yeah.
like communication, like with them as healing guides, because I think a lot of the ancient healers always had the higher beings talking to them. Don't you think? Like, it
Yeah.
feels like it
Yeah.
was such an aspect of holistic medicine to work with the divas, the fairies, the fairy energy healing.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
very much part of it. And I have really strong Irish ancestry too. Um, and Scots and English and Germanic. And um, yeah, there was such a deep tradition in that fairy realms that was just part of their life. And what happened to a lot of our ancestors was we were cut off because of the persecution of the wise women, the wise ones, the medicine people, the ones that carried this knowledge. They were definitely cut off from continuing a lot of those lineages. And sort of when the church came in, it sort of shut down a lot of the pagan beliefs. But if you really look back, I had this really lovely journey of going back to like the origins of my ancestors. And I went back through my mother's lineage and my father's. And when I went through my mother's lineage, my grandfather grew up in Ireland. I went all the way back, and it was so great. I saw this like ancient ancestor, and she was this very small fairy woman. She was very mystical. She was like in the mist, by the water, and totally magical woman. And it was so great to have that vision. Oh yeah, like in my human blood lineage, going all the way back and seeing where that comes from, and then calling through that remembering, calling those guides back, calling the fairy realm back, calling ourselves, letting go of what is in the way of the fear of that, because there have been some really hard things that have gone on that have kind of cut people off from that remembering, that fairy seership. And yeah.
Yes, yeah. And I feel like that's a huge part of my path, is being such an intuitive, clairvoyant, shamanic journeyer, being okay with that, like seeing there's nothing wrong with that, and that it's not crazy, weird, silly, has been a major I would say like tripping point almost, because it's like
I
your whole
know.
intuition is like, yeah, I see them, I hear them, this is what's happening, but society has programmed us so much that it's weird and make believe.
And
And
taboo even,
yeah, and so
you know?
you fear humiliation, and then it undercuts our own intuition, and I think we're just kind of unraveling that in like levels, because you think you're okay, and then when you're around like soul family, and then you might be
Mhm.
challenged again to go somewhere where people are like, don't get it.
Yeah.
you know?
And even in this, this culture that we're in right now has become more polarized. It's become very judgmental, and even the comedy is extremely judgmental. So these things that we know to be true, and we've kind of broken down old beliefs to realize what is our true belief, like that can really get ridiculed in this culture, in this world. People can mock you and censor you, and all sorts of things. So I think it's just an interesting time to recognize it's so important for us to step up and really um, be in these new roles. And I think that's a real theme of why you would want to get to learn more about it and open even to the fear. I've had taught classes where there's a number of people who had distinctive fears about working with different elementals like mermaids, dragons, or gnomes. And it really was back to that wounding um, that they had in their family lineage. So to really face that and break through to your magic, to your gifts, to your medicine is so important. And this cusp that we're at now, I'd love you to speak on this too, Andrea, like this cusp we're at right now, this huge shift into 2024, and like so much of the old is falling away, old relationships, old beliefs, karma, whatever is just not needed anymore. And there's this need to open kind of to that mystery of what's next. Like, what are these new roles? We're becoming new people. We're becoming different frequencies in how we operate, more loving, outside of that system of judgment, outside of that system of persecution. So it's just important to start opening up, like, why did you come to the earth? What is your role here, as far as your fairy gifts, your elemental gifts, your gifts in the garden, with farming, with healing, as an earth keeper, a grid worker.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of, and we're going to explore that in my class too. So it's just up now because that's coming up soon, but it's just all these great like awarenesses and conversations, and being brave, right? To courage to kind of open to ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's funny how just to be like, have fun and play and open your imagination, have a sense of wonder. Like, it's so hard for us adults because of all this past, right? And so it's sort of revolutionary, right? To just be playful and joyful and awaken this aspect of yourself that is beyond the norm.
And I think that's an evolutionary shift, an ancestral shift, because I know for me, like my mom was a natural healer, probably fairy healer, but she was shamed a lot, humiliated a lot. People would, I remember always like experiencing them make fun of her a lot in public. And she was a gentle soul, not like a kind of rebel. I'm a little bit more of a rebel. So she would always be like, Andrea, don't tell people what we do and hide it. And she wouldn't really talk back. So I'm looking at my evolution of like being a little more rebel deviant and not caring as much. And that's the next step. But I think I only know that because I watched her have to hide and be humiliated. Yet as a child, I could sense her feminine intuition, and it was comforting for me because she was a leader then in like knowing what to do and like for healing and stuff. So like I trusted her as a child, but I also would watch the way she wasn't accepted and parts of the like people in the family, in the mainstream, and then the way she taught me to hide, like wear this but hide it, you know. And so I've been going through this lesson of like, what's the next step, that we're holding space even when we do a class or write a book or whatever we make for the world. We're holding space for others to come out of their spiritual closet, because the oppression is so like part of us, we don't even realize we're oppressed, and we're walking around conforming, controlled. And so it's almost like hypnotic, where when I started to be like, yeah, I'm like a fairy intuitive and I want to work with fairies, I would have to keep reminding my mind, like, this is what you are, because I was so programmed that you're not that. But at those epiphany times, when I would remember, I would like really put it in my schedule. Like I'd schedule doing fairy classes, fairy time. I'd be like, and just remind myself on my phone, like my list, like you feel good when you make dates with the fairies. You feel good when you draw with the fairies. You feel good when you do fairy energy healing, and that this needs to be in the world. And it's like,
Yeah.
then I would look for those things, and it would be hard to find. It's still hard to find.
Yeah.
If you look on Instagram and different places, it's still not even like
It
famous
is.
hashtags. Like people are like, what do you mean fairy healing? They think it's like a Disney movie, cartoon, or kids party. And it's still like hush hush. And so I'm always like, fairies, what are
Ah,
we doing? We're secret. And they say, well, people just need the secret pass to come to our realm. But
right. I
still
think so.
waiting.
You've said that before too, that it's almost like we're part of a mystery school and we're pioneering, bringing back these teachings and remembering. And I know both of us have this big karma, and I know a lot of people I work with, this hidden karma, right? Where we're just like really hidden, and our life is about coming out and blooming and expressing. And it's part of sort of the feminine, defined feminine healing process too, right? Because it's the earth and it's nature and it's sort of what's considered more feminine. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting. I know we've talked about this so many times over the years too, and I think it's important for those out there who feel this like energy around this to find other people you can share and talk with, hang out with us, if you don't, but like be with others that are like you, because you'll have permission to be yourself and to really express, and also to know like the fairy realms, elementals, they're always with you. You may be one, like a hybrid human. And so really the path here on this planet is for us to express ourselves, express who we are, and also yeah, our true nature. That was a message from the fairy queen all the time. She was always like, express your true nature. I'm always true to my true nature. So I'll pass that on to you.
Yeah.
Like,
And we're only going to
be true to your nature. And our culture is so cut off from nature, right?
yeah.
That I think why this is sort of almost subversive, taboo, hidden thing is because people are so cut off from this. So I'm hoping that, Andrea, we're like part of this cusp, pioneering, like get back into nature, open your imagination. It's so joyful and fun and powerful and healing, right?
Yeah, the spirit of nature, and just like, part of that also is the creativity that we can, if we want to sculpt green men, we can do it. If we want to sculpt fairies, like I think that's a huge message that they're coming in with, is being your unique self. And for me, it's like healing, and it's art, and it's creativity. And I feel at home in those places, like when I was in art school, or when I'm at a botanical garden, or I'm at a fairy class or a fairy convention, and it's like paying attention to those body feelings, that it's like, yes, this is where I'm at home. Because a lot of us, I say, like the star seeds, we're so used to not feeling at home on earth, but
Yeah,
like as we reawaken and come fully here, we're like, oh, let's find the places where we belong. And I feel like that with like basic like starseed empath teachings, where people like, I don't belong anywhere and nothing feels right. It's like, go deeper. Look, where do
yeah,
you belong, with what groups of people, what places? Because it's never like an absolute yes or no. Like, because I had that issue with schools when I was a child. Like if I was in highly creative schools, I would thrive. If there was no creativity, I would not do well. And it's
yeah,
like, what? Wow. And this is going into the education system. I mean, the fairies are helping with all the systems, the healthcare, education, living, sustainability. Like, I think that's a major way they're bringing in like common sense to humanity. Like, oh, let's have more heart-centered, more intuitive systems.
yeah.
And so
And
it's
also, like, so much is built for that kind of loud extrovert um, culture, right? And if you don't get a big bang and a big experience and um, then it's not so true. that's sort of been the belief in this system. So I think that's really important to recognize, like the empaths, the sensitives, those who are, quieter, working on those deeper realms. It's such a important and key part of being yourself and contributing in the way that you do. It may not look like, going out and doing things in the way you see around you. Chances are it won't at all. It'll maybe be a quiet corner that you're, working with, or a group of people. But just know it's really powerful and important. Yeah, that's how nature works.
And
Be part
really,
of, be part of the forest, right? Each one of us is part of the forest. And just to radiate that and know that we'll connect with the other people that want to engage with that part of the forest.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. That's true. And I the term fairy, what's called urban fairying always comes up for me. And I want to talk more about it because it's like sometimes you think, well, I have to live in like a nature preserve and like to do this. And it's like finding just the fairy magic in your suburban city environments, like the little
And
gardens, the little trees, the plants that want to work with you. It's been such a source of joy and balance for me because we can't always live on a farm or, live in a giant garden, but we could create, little gardens in our home and like go to the local things and like really awaken that like in our community. Like, where do the fairies want me to go? Because like I moved to a new town and I found like this little like botanical garden in walking distance, and the fairies always call me there. And it's so amazing. And it's like sometimes that's a magical thing too, where like there's all these secret fairy realms all around us. Once we look
yeah.
for them, like we found all the little forests by you also in walking distance. And so I really encourage people to like ask the fairies to almost be activated in their neighborhood, in their yard, and like, because once we engage them, they get louder and they'll be like, oh, I'm over here, like a passion flowers over here. Or like once the holly became very loud at Christmas time, it told me where it was. And so it's like once we start to like open up that listening, they do get louder. And so I want to talk about that too, because once I started consciously being like, okay, I'm going to listen to the fairies, they got louder. And then they'd ask me to do things, but sometimes it was like, go clean up garbage up the street. And I'm like, okay, tell me
Yeah.
again later. I don't feel like doing it now. And they'd always remind me. That's so cute. Like,
Well, yeah, this is really going into that next step of having relationship, right, with the fairy realms and these
yeah,
different beings. And so there is a trust and a doorway that opens. I always like to look at it like there's an invitation, when there's an invitation to be in certain places of nature or go to a tree, then just being present there, start connecting, and then there's that relationship you build. And I think that's a really important key too about our new roles here, is about conscious co-creation with these realms, right? Like we were talking about, our ancestors didn't just live as a human in their own, separated the way our culture has developed into. They were so connected, they were farmers, they were growing food, they were hunting, they were so connected with all of nature and the different spirits of the lands. So they could ask, yeah, what do they need? How do they want to co-create with us? So that to me is, I think, a really important kind of next step for humanity, is how do we not just work to like renew landscapes and waterways and that kind of thing in a very physical renewal way, but how do we really connect with the spirits and the energies and the magic that wants to come through. And I know different people will have different roles, but that's
yeah.
what I'm excited
And
about.
different fairies, because I feel like you've
Yeah.
introduced me just more like big, almost archangel looking like fairies that are like, we're gonna like grid the river and protect the river. And then there's like little ones that are just like in the house plants, or like creativity ones, or like it's interesting all the fairy jobs, because I know since I've been aware, and I think I've been influenced by your work, which is more physical and like, you know, gridding the land and the water wheels and different things, driving past polluted rivers, like then going to sleep that night and having visions of like giant fairies with crystals doing healing. And it was like very interesting how that doors open to like this infinite realm of the fairies and their different jobs too. And you know,
Yeah, exactly.
and
So
that's
it's
the
sort of,
co-creation, how they can boost what we're
yeah,
doing.
like
Like,
our roles and jobs and purpose, and then theirs, and
yeah.
who we're going to work with and how and where.
And it's a lot of service work, whether it's
Yeah.
helping the homeless, building houses, cleaning the rivers, having cleaner water, like a lot of like very practical physical things. And so I think that's coming up too, like in we can work with the fairies if our life purpose is part of that. We want to support those things for part of the positive evolution of humanity, because they do come in with help, you know.
Yeah, and I think just as an example, like at your house, you want your house to feel good living there. You want your land to feel good to walk around, like just the state of health and well-being, how you feel. You want the land and the earth and the plants and fairy realms, ancestral realms, like the spirits around you, when they feel good, like you feel good, and vice versa. So I think there's a process of awakening in the energy, and the magic and spirit of places, as well, that are really keyed in, tied into these relationships, right? It's like probably everyone's been somewhere where you go to a place and it just feels horrible, right? It needs some help. And other places you go, oh my God, it feels so good here. What's going on? Like, that's definitely, like the fairies talking, right? The spirits there. Are they, what's happened here before? Is there something that needs help? And that gets into kind of land alchemy work that I offer as well. So
Yeah.
we could go on forever and ever, but I don't know, is there anything else that you want to bring forward? It feels like a good
Yeah, I just want
review of a lot of topics that, some are kind of like the challenges of this work, what's happened in our disconnection, but also this excitement that things are really opening. People's intuition is opening way up right now. So I think everyone's going to be able to see and connect more with these realms.
yeah, and just I just want to share just like simple ways, you know, to connect with the fairies. Just practice connecting with them. Ask them like, how are you, what fairy spirit guides are with me or part of my team, and how do they want to work with me? Because for me, they just open up a lot of information, like intuitive information and connection. And it's been so fulfilling. So it's like inspiring people to seek that, you know,
Yeah.
take some time to do that, whether you're journaling or meditating or reading. If you're drawn to that, pursue it. And I think that's a really important tool right now, is trusting that intuition. If you're drawn to the
Yeah.
fairies and they feel good, pursue that, practice then, or ask why. Why do I have a vision of a fairy? And I had an interesting thing like that where I kept having a vision of a fairy and it wasn't telling me what was going on. And then people started giving me information. And then, to make a long story short, the fairy was a special fairy that helped children in hospitals. And then I had made some fairy coloring books that were going to a hospital. So it was like it all was weaved together with this fairy that I was just like seeing like this shady figure. And I was like, who are you? And then they emerged as Tinkerbell. And then the history of Tinkerbell emerged as like a fairy art that always was given back to the hospitals and things to uplift the children. And it was so interesting to understand this story of that service of the joy. And then just like it was just beautiful, because I was like, who is
Yeah.
this fairy? And then they were shocked. Then their purpose was uncovering the helping. So
But I love that too, because it's like shows you the journey. It's not always that you get like this thunderbolt that says, do this, or, make this or whatever, or come here, that you just let that kind of unfold
yeah, it was like a
naturally.
shy fairy in a vision, but then people
Yeah.
started telling me stories, And then each one lit up, like they were like, did you know this fairy's good for this? And then it was just like, that's the fairy I was seeing. Like, wow. Well, yeah. So before we wrap up, do you want to talk a little bit about your, the fairy class you're offering and how people can sign up?
Yeah, I do have my event on Eventbrite. But probably the easiest is just to go to my website at camillablossom.com and look under events, and then you can find it there. And you don't actually have to attend live to join. You can watch replays, or if you want to join live, it's always really fun. And that's coming up December 7th is the first part 1, and part 2's the 14th.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and we'll do a lot more kind of deeper journeys and connections and kind of open the way and healing, but really, yeah, intuitively guided by these beautiful spirits.
Yeah.
What about you? Do you want to share? I'd love to hear you share more about what you offer for your classes and anything coming up or available now. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I have a ton of fairy classes. I have the Winter Fairy Collection. I do seasonal collections for each season, working with the fairies of the season. And then I just released a few new ones. The Red Rose Fairy Queen is a new one I just released, and that was a lot of beautiful heart energy and deep healing of the broken heart, and like healing the root and the heart chakra and fairy tale magic. It was interesting. And then I'm also releasing an elven medicine class. And I'm also just starting a membership where we'll dive into working with lots of different energies, including fairies. And I'll be sharing more information about that in my Facebook group, where I do offer a bunch of free fairy classes too, including 7 days of Fairy Christmas, which I do every year in my Facebook group. So that's Angel Fairy Healing with Andrea Dombecki. And so I did want to talk about the magical fairies of the season a little before we wrap up, just like the reindeers, the holly, the mistletoe, and how every year drawing them and connecting with them has really lightened up my holiday season, and just kind of bringing some of that magic through for everybody.
Yeah. And like the amanitas and the kind of learning about the origins of the holiday. There's a lot of fairy and elemental activity involved.
Yeah, in the Christmas tree. I remember like when I moved once, I didn't have a Christmas tree, and it was like Christmas Eve or somewhere very close, and the fairies were like, you need a tree, and they found like a really cheap one for me. Because it's really like decorated. It's like all that decorating is really very fun, like bringing the fairy aspect in it for me.
And when you think of, I know not everyone celebrates Christmas too, but there's sort of an emphasis on that. But the season really is about the winter solstice, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. And so it is, that the dark cave kind of introspective time, and then the lighting, the return of the sun. And so there is a lot of emphasis on nature and kind of that dark time. So there's plenty
we
of
could use some fairy light and magic.
So
Well,
light
yes.
candles for the fairies and at solstice. And I'm thinking of doing a solstice meditation too. So you can look at events on my website for that.
Great. Yeah. And just send in lots of fairy blessings to everybody. Yay. That you receive whatever you need, whatever the fairies wanted to give you today, because they're knocking on your door. And for us too, why did they come through today? I'm sure that's going to unfold even more today. So
yeah, I can see lots of them around everyone. So bye.
All right. Yeah. And look forward for more summits with Camilla and I, where we're sharing, healing topics and different things we love to get on. And we're sharing this on YouTube also. So you can watch the replays on the YouTube channel. So far, we have the dragon one also.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Bye, everyone.